For years, the battle over Iran's future has largely revolved around familiar players: the United States of America, Israel, and the Islamic Republic itself. But now, a surprising new name has entered the conversation: Ukraine. Just days after reports suggested that the Trump administration is once again debating ways to increase pressure on Tehran, including discussions around the long-debated question of regime change, an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea came under attack. Ukraine was linked to the operation, marking one of the most unexpected developments in the widening geopolitical contest surrounding Iran. So is it merely a coincidence, or is there a bigger strategy quietly taking shape? Well, till now, there is no public evidence that Washington directed Ukraine's action or that Kiev is participating in a coordinated campaign to bring down Iran's leadership. But the geopolitical parallels are very difficult to ignore at this very juncture. Just listen carefully. Once again, America's principal adversary is a close Russian ally, Iran. And if Trump administration is seriously considering ways to weaken or even bring about political change in Tehran, Ukraine could emerge as an important player because they have experience to pull something like this. But we'll come to that part later. So this edition of From the News Desk is going to be very interesting because we'll try to answer a very intriguing question. Could Ukraine become America's newest strategic partner in confronting one of Russia's closest allies, which is Iran? And also, why Ukraine seemed to be a perfect American partner if Trump wants to execute his change regime plan. Well, Iran has never been just another foreign policy issue for Donald Trump. Remember, during his first presidency, Trump withdrew from the nuclear deal, imposed crippling sanctions, and ordered the killing of IRGC commander Qasem Soleimani. In fact, he has repeatedly declared that Tehran poses one of the greatest threats to American interest. And during his second presidency, we know what's happening. Now, reports suggest that members of his administration are again discussing ways to fundamentally weaken the Islamic Republic since diplomacy is not working between the two nations. Well, officially, Washington has not announced a policy of regime change, but Trump, time and again, has talked about it. Now, only a few days after reports surfaced of Trump once again considering regime change ops in Iran, another headline grabbed global attention. An Iranian vessel operating in the Caspian Sea was actually struck. Unlike previous attacks linked to Israel or the United States, this incident pointed towards Ukraine. Now, for many observers, that immediately raised eyebrows. Why would Kiev, already deeply engaged in a war with Russia, suddenly open another front involving Iran? Well, the answer lies in Iran's role in the Russia-Ukraine war itself. Ukraine has long accused Tehran of supplying Russia with drone, missile technology, and military cooperation. In fact, Iranian-designed Shahid drones have become one of Moscow's most recognized weapons against Ukrainian cities. So from Kiev's perspective, Iran is not a distant Middle East issue. It is a country actively helping Russia wage war against Ukraine. That alone gives Ukraine an independent strategic reason to target Iranian military capabilities. Now, this is where history becomes interesting. Reports over the past years have highlighted Ukraine's growing expertise in unconventional warfare beyond its own border. According to multiple reports, Ukrainian intelligence maintained contacts with anti-Assad groups in Syria and reportedly shared intelligence that complicated Russia's military presence there. While the extent of that cooperation remains debated, but many analysts believe Ukraine viewed Syria as another arena where Russia could be weakened indirectly. And the logic was actually straightforward. If Russia is forced to defend its interest in multiple regions, its military resources become increasingly stretched, and when Bashar al-Assad's government actually collapsed, it represented a significant setback for Moscow and another blow to Iran's regional influence. Now, whether Ukraine played a decisive role remains contested, but it demonstrated something very important. Kiev is increasingly willing to think beyond traditional battlefields. Now we wonder whether the methods used against Russian interests in Syria could eventually be adapted against Iran. Well, the similarities are actually striking. Both Assad, Syria and Iran have relied heavily on Russian political and military support. Both have faced years of Western sanctions. Both have become central pillars of Moscow's strategy in the Middle East. And if Washington seeks to increase pressure on Tehran, Ukraine's intelligence experience could actually become useful. Also remember, intelligence sharing between allies is hardly unusual. And it won't be wrong to say that Ukraine has developed sophisticated cyber capabilities and covert operation planning during its conflict with Russia. And those capabilities have attracted close attention from Western militaries, including the United States. So the question is no longer whether Ukraine possesses unique expertise. It does. But the real question is whether that expertise could someday be directly pointed towards another battlefield. If such cooperation were ever to emerge, why would Ukraine support it? Well, for Washington, the answer is obvious. And for Ukraine, the calculation is much more straightforward. Every Iranian drone factory disrupted, every weapons shipment delayed, every military asset destroyed could ultimately reduce Russia's ability to wage war against Ukraine. Basically, in simpler words, the enemy is shared. America sees Iran as a long-term regional challenge. Ukraine sees Iran as one of Russia's most important military suppliers, and their interests overlap even if their methods differ. Now here history offers an important warning. Removing government is far easier than creating stable replacements. The United States has experienced this firsthand in Iraq, Afghanistan and also in Libya. Now Iran is an even more complex case. The country has powerful security institutions, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It possesses extensive missile forces and regional proxy networks which stretch from Lebanon and Iraq to Yemen. And any attempt to force political change from outside would almost certainly encounter enormous resistance. Even many critics of the Iranian government caution that external intervention could unite different political factions rather than dividing them. Now, this is ultimately the question driving today's speculation. The sequence of events has certainly captured attention. First came reports of renewed discussion in Washington about toppling the Mujtaba regime. Then came Ukraine's strike involving an Iranian vessel. And then came renewed debate about whether Kiev's growing expertise in covert operation could someday extend beyond Russia. Well, none of these developments by themselves prove coordination between the two nations. But together, they have encouraged at least us to ask whether a broader geopolitical alignment is quietly taking shape. But definitely it seems at this juncture, Russia, Iran, Israel, the United States and Ukraine are increasingly connected through the overlapping conflicts. Well, what happens in one region now echoes in another. Perhaps Ukraine's strike was simply another move in its own war against Russian military supply chain. Perhaps Washington's discussion about Iran have nothing to do with Kiev. Or perhaps these are the early signs of a broader strategic convergence, where countries confronting the same adversaries begin coordinating in ways that are not visible immediately. But at this stage, there is no public evidence that Ukraine is participating in a US-led regime change campaign against Iran. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The geopolitical map is definitely changing. Ukraine is no longer fighting only on the battlefields like Donbass. Iran is no longer just a Middle Eastern issue. And as Russia's allies come under growing pressure from multiple directions, the lines separating regional wars are beginning to blur. Whether this is simply a coincidence or perhaps an opening chapter of a much larger geopolitical contest is a question that the coming months may answer. Well, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of From the News Desk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm Yash Goyal signing off for Times Now Digital. Until next time, take care and keep watching this space for more such videos.